Hello friends, welcome to my channel for the editorial analysis of September 5th. If you like my video, do hit the like button, subscribe my channel and also give your opinion. And friends, the important article for today is Making Up for the Lost Time. It's an excellent article about India-Myanmar relationship where varieties of dimensions were given. So we will cover this articles in detail. And the next article which we will discuss today is Down but Not Out. This article is all about IRNSS and PSLV. I have given you a glimpse of background with respect to IRNSS and PSLV and then I have discussed this article. Plus, mind the mandate is not important for us because it talks about the political scenario which is prevailing in Assam, which is not important. And this article is all about USA-North Korea relationship. So the tensions between USA and North Korea is growing day by day. And now the North Korea has tested the hydrogen bomb and even the USA government is following an stringent policy against the North Korea. So it happens to be conflict scenario which is mentioned by the article and says multilateral talks involving China, South Korea should be a better option in order to resolve this tension. So it's more than enough if you know these points from this article. It's not important from the UPSC perspective. And this article is a research article which tries to talk about the Homo sapiens. I'm not going to discuss this article. So these are the two articles which we will discuss today. Fine. So coming to the first article, Making Up for Lost Time. See guys, this article is all about the India-Myanmar relationship and our Prime Minister is going to visit Myanmar. So different dimensions of India-Myanmar relationship is brought into this article which is written by an ambassador. Fine. So the article mentions our Prime Minister will go for an official visit to Myanmar from September 5 and even he has gone to Myanmar in November 2014 for the Asian Summit and even our former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has visited Myanmar. So the article mentions, though overdue, that is, even though the visit is behind the time, taking into account our Prime Minister neighborhood's first attitude and even activist policy and the diaspora policy and the domestic developments have clarified that these sort of visits could not be possible earlier. So it tries to say that our Prime Minister was committed towards other works and because of this, the visit is delayed. Fine. And even the elections in Myanmar which held in 2015 that brought National League for Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi, fine, who happens to be the leader of this National League for Democracy, came into the power after the elections in Myanmar and even the US elections has been bought in, plus the Chinese One Belt One Road initiative and even the South China Sea and the Indo-China border standoff and the Rohingya issues which is prevailing in the Myanmar. So these sort of issues were prevailing and because of this, the visit is lagging behind. Fine. So first the article talks about the Rohingya crisis. So guys, you need to know the Rohingya crisis. I'll just give you the crux format of what the Rohingya crisis is all about. See, Rohingyas are an ethnic minority in Rakhine state of Myanmar. So I have given you the map here. This happens to be the Rakhine state and the Rohingyas used to live here. Fine. And they follow Islam religion. So one could see that this Rakhine state shares borders with Bay of Bengal to the south and it shares borders with the Bangladesh as well. And if you look at the historical perspective of these Rohingyas, then they were based upon the Chittagong region of Bangladesh. So during the British era, many of the Rohingyas fled from the Bangladesh, that is from Chittagong region, to Rakhine state of Myanmar. And the problem here is the Myanmar government or the people of Myanmar do not accept Rohingyas as a part of their country. It is because there could be two possible reasons. One is the Rohingyas follow Islam religion, but the Myanmar is a Buddhist majority nation. Plus, even when the British left India, the Rohingyas claimed that the Rakhine state should be integrated with the Pakistan, that is Bangladesh. So from that time, the Rohingyas were seen with a sense of hatred by the Myanmar government. And this led to the evolution of Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. So it's an Rohingya militant group who have started attacking the Myanmar government and the forces. So they have resorted for the violence and some sort of conflict is prevailing over there in Rakhine state. Plus these Rohingyas started migrating. So they tend to migrate to Bangladesh or Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. So these are the options which are available to them for migrating. And even you could add these points, that is the Rohingyas peoples are considered stateless entities as the Myanmar government do not recognize them. Plus even the Rohingyas seen themselves as the natives of Arakan. See, Arakan is the another name for the Rakhine state. So even they seen themselves as a natives of this Rakhine, which happens to be a state in Myanmar. And the problem now for India is Rohingyas coming into Bangladesh from the Rakhine state is continuing into India. So it is estimated that nearly about thousands of Rohingyas are in India right now because Bangladesh has closed its doors for the Rohingyas. So now they are entering in India via the northeast region, and this causes many internal security concerns for India. And guys, you need to know one thing over here, that is India is not a signatory of United Nations Refugee Conventions and its protocol. So India has not signed this refugee conventions because of its certain reservations. See, it is not only with respect to the Rohingyas, it is even we have problem with the Baluch people in Pakistan. So it is the Foreigners Act 1946 and the Registrations of Foreigners Act 1939 govern the entry and the exits of these refugees. Fine. So these Rohingyas people are treated by India as a foreigner and it is not as a refugee. Fine. I hope you got my point. Fine. So that's it with the background, and we'll move on to the article. As the article mentions, the visit is taking place in the middle of a worst violent scenario which is prevailing in Myanmar, that is with respect to the Rohingya militants, and this has resulted in a full-fledged international crisis which is coordinated by the Rohingyas militants who recently formed Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which we saw. So here the article claims these Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army has been designated as a terrorist in Myanmar, and they tend to act against the government and the security outpost. Fine. And even the attacks and the clear operations against it have resulted in some sort of deaths. Mostly Rohingyas have lost their life, displacing many of them across the Naf river to Bangladesh. See guys, again I have given you a map here. This happens to be the Naf river. So you could see that this Naf river happens to be the border between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Fine. So in order to migrate, they have to cross this Naf river. As the article mentions, a sense of humanitarian crisis is prevailing in this Rakhine state. So even the present government has condemned this, that is claiming this Arakan Rohingyas as a terrorist has been under severe criticism, not only by the Indian government but also by many nations. So it is likely that the Indian government will favor Myanmar with respect to this issue. So one could not see that Mr. Modi will support the Myanmar stance with respect to the Rohingyas. And one more thing is that this visit is also taking place against the backdrop of uncertainties in the future India-China relationship, which is caused by the Doklam standoff. See guys, I have taken the Doklam standoff with the background. I have given you a link in the description box. So if you are new to this channel, then you're going to have a go through. So the Doklam standoff has ended now, and the BRICS summit came to an end, and the future India-China relationship is in an uncertain way. And now Myanmar is very keen for its growth, and for its growth it needs to have a good relationship between the two fastest growing economies in Asia, that is India and China. Plus the article also mentions Myanmar also known the shortcomings of its economic dependence on China. See, here the article indirectly tries to mention the Chinese aggressive policy, and however Myanmar is also important because of its natural resource and the access to the Bay of Bengal, that is the Sitwe port in Myanmar is an important port to access the Bay of Bengal, and even the oil and gas terminal over this region. So China has an extractive relationship, and it follows an extractive relationship, and Myanmar is well known about this. And even this article talks about the Kyaukpyu deep sea harbor. See guys, again I have given you the map here for the Kyaukpyu harbor in Myanmar, so which happens to be a deep water port, which even has a greater potential for the China because of its ambitious One Belt One Road initiative. So Myanmar is important to China, and the article mentions Myanmar now would welcome closer economic ties with India to balance and offset the ties vis-a-vis the China. See, we saw here that China has an extractive relationship, that is it tend to be more aggressive and take out all the benefits, and Myanmar relationship with China has been on the similar lines. So it is time for the Myanmar now to engage closer with India in order to balance this, and especially China. Plus this article tries to talk about the basic issue of India and Myanmar. So it tries to say beyond these issue, that is we saw with respect to the Myanmar Rakhine state and even Chinese India Myanmar triangle. So in spite of these issue, the focus will be on the basics. So it will most likely to take up the fundamentals of the bilateral relationship. For instance, the trade issue will be looked upon, and even the revival of the culture will be seen, and even the defense relationship between India and Myanmar will also be revisited, and even the security related talks will be discussed at the national security level by the National Security Advisor. So the article mentions a number of bilateral agreements in the area of capacity building, health, culture, development, maritime security are on the table, which makes the relationship worth $2 billion. And even the article tries to mention few infrastructure projects which India has funded. For instance, the trilateral highway and even the Kaladan multimodal transport and transit project, even the high value capacity and human development projects like Myanmar Institute of Information Technology in Mandalay, and even health, entrepreneurship, language training, small borders areas, and even development programs in the Naga areas of Myanmar. So it's like India has been funding Myanmar throughout the years, and the points which is given here are the important dimensions which one could use with respect to the India-Myanmar relationship. And guys, here I would like to explain the Kaladan multimodal transport and transit project. See guys, this Kaladan multimodal transit project is a project for India for the easy access of northeastern region. It is with the help of Myanmar through the Irrawaddy river. India is planning for a greater access in the northeastern region. So this Kaladan multimodal transport project has an highest potential in the future, where this transit model will involve trade between Kolkata to Situi port, and from Situi through the Irrawaddy river they will access the northeastern region. So one could even know that the Chicken Neck happens to be a narrow land, and even one could know that India access in the northeastern region is very poor. So this could mitigate this. Fine. Plus the article also tries to mention, in spite of we funding Myanmar in these dimensions, this may not be adequately realized even in Myanmar, because even few countries are undertaking large infrastructure and human development projects like India, and even the status of the projects which is aided by the India will be completed only by 2020. So it is tend to be operational only by 2020. So it is after that we could see an expanded relationship with the Myanmar. And even the article mentions one cannot fully assure of this relationship, and especially with respect to the commercial trade and investment, because the relationship with the Myanmar is narrow. So the article mentions agricultural and the forest products in the case of trade, and even oil and gas in the case of investment should be the main priority, should be underlined, and both the governments should work to expand this and upgrade commercial ties so that it could contribute a huge amount of volume in trade. So the article mentions even the greatest extent is not realized with respect to the Myanmar, and trade has been the keystone from the independence, and it is only this trade which has survived both the nationalizations. That is, even though there is a change in government in Myanmar, it is only this trade relationship between India and Myanmar have survived. So importance of this trade is India importing beans and pulses. So please make a note guys, it is these beans and pulses which play an important role in our food security, and it is one of the important factor for the Myanmar's economy, and we have a good trade relationship with Myanmar with respect to this beans and pulses. Fine. So the article mentions nearly about $1 billion of beans and pulses are exported to India. That is, it is approximately 90% of the Myanmar production is exported to India, and it is very important for the Myanmar's farmers, and it is very important for their foreign exchange earnings. And if you compare the rice exports which the Myanmar does to China, then it is this beans and pulses has an higher value. So it is even greater than the value of rice which is exported to China. Fine. So the article mentions even the rice export to China is of periodic restrictions because of tough inspections, and there is a crackdown on the informal trade at the China-Myanmar border. So Chinese has been very strict with respect to this trade, especially with the rice. So Myanmar is showcasing interest in India for its rice export, which could be an alternative to the China. Fine. So the article mentions this should be reopened. But unfortunately, the recent decision of the Indian government to have a restrictions on the trade in pulses is exactly the opposite. See, it is because we have our own incentive to increase and protect the domestic production of pulses in India. And we have gone in for restrictions because even there is a speculation in the global trade in pulses. So the article mentions Myanmar should induce a government channelized trade to stabilize the trade and the prices of the pulses. Fine. So even this article tries to talk about other ties. That is, we have a strong cultural people to people and diaspora relationship with Myanmar, and even our Prime Minister will visit Bagan. See, Bagan is a place where the Archaeological Survey of India is in its final stage to revive the Ananda temple, and even the cabinet has approved few assistance for the restorations of pagodas which was damaged by the 2016 earthquake. See guys, here the pagodas means it is a style of temple in Myanmar. So I have given you the image here. This is how a pagoda looks. Fine. So the article mentions our Prime Minister will visit and address the Indian origin and the Indian communities and the religious as well as cultural and historical important places in order to revive the older ties, that is the cultural ties with Myanmar. And even a view with the Bay of Bengal and the South China Sea issue could be brought up, because India would seek to have a consensus with the political parties in Myanmar for a stronger ties with India and to project its favorable support for the economic and strategic footprint in the Bay of Bengal and South China Sea. See, one could notice that China is dominating or wanted to have a hold over the South China Sea for varieties of reasons, and even it has been developing and funding many ports around the Bay of Bengal. One could see the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, and in Myanmar it could be the Sitwe port and the Kyokapu port which we saw earlier, and even in Pakistan China is developing Khandla port. See, however it belongs to Arabian Sea, but even though it tries to have a dominant position in the Bay of Bengal region. Fine. So India would try to strengthen its position even in this region. So it could seek the Myanmar support for this. Fine. And even the article mentions even a greater attention to the emerging political forces in Myanmar, and even the ethnic states and the peace process in Myanmar could be talked about, and even converting the investment, that is, we saw that the trilateral highway and even the Kaladan multimodal transit projects where India has invested a lot, it is yet to be operational. So even things could be focused over this issue, and India would like converting these investment into reality. Plus the article also mentions even this investment could be in the greater Mekong sub-region. See guys, this greater Mekong sub-regions is a part of a Myanmar where the Mekong river flows. Fine. And even Myanmar is a nation where the Mekong river has its basin. So even India would like to invest in this region with a focus on agriculture, agro-industries and light industry. And even a border development partnership program could be brought out in order to help the civil society who is living on the borders of India-Myanmar. Because one could know that the northeastern region insurgent groups has its base and camps in Myanmar. So there are many civil society who is working for them in order to mitigate the issue. So a border development partnership program could also be one dimension with respect to the India-Myanmar relationship. So the article in the conclusion mentions the objective of this visit should be to restore the balance in Myanmar relation that has been lost with the eastward tilt in the Myanmar external relation over 50 years. See, it's like the Chinese influence over the Myanmar is greater, and even Myanmar is more looking towards its east, that is the Asian region. So it is because of these things the relationship between India and Myanmar was not up to its mark for the past 50 years, and the article say both the countries have forgotten that they are immediate neighbors. So there should be a need to revive this psychological mindset and to bring up ties between India and Myanmar. Fine. So that's it with respect to this article. And guys, in the correct format, the points which we saw from this article is: first, the Rohingya crisis, and India will not support the Rohingya crisis. That is, India will not support the Myanmar government for their stance on the Rohingyas, and the Nav River, which we saw, which is important for the prelims point of view, and even the Chinese dominance in Myanmar and its extractive policy. So Myanmar has to look towards India in order to balance this. And the other dimension is health, culture, maritime security, and especially the development projects which India has taken in Myanmar, that is the Kaladan multi-modal transport and transit projects, and even the trilateral highway, plus the agriculture and the forest products from the Myanmar in the case of trade, and oil and gas in case of investment should be revived. And even Myanmar exporting beans and pulses to India, which contributes nearly about 95% of the Myanmar exports, that is with respect to the beans and pulses in particular. And the cultural ties could be another thing, which is the Ananda temple which we saw, and the revival of the pagodas. Plus, India want to have a dominant position in the Bay of Bengal and the South China Sea, and the engagement over the Mekong sub-region, a part of the Mekong River in Myanmar, where India could revive its ties with respect to agriculture, agro-industry and light industry, and a change in the psychological mindset that we are immediate neighbors. Fine. So these are the points which we got from this article, which I hope is sufficient to write more than 10 points with respect to the India-Myanmar relationship. And guys, here I would like to give you a tip. If you start writing any answer with respect to the neighborhood nations or bilateral relationship, then I would suggest you to start from the historical perspective or from the cultural perspective. So in the case of Myanmar, you can write about the revival of the Ananda temple. So writing with the historical background or the cultural background has its own advantage, which could give a sense of view for the examiner that the person has a diversified knowledge. Fine. So that's it with respect to this article, guys. And you can get a question with respect to India and Myanmar relationship in GS paper 2, where you could get a question that the India-Myanmar ties has not up to its fullest potential till now. What are the reasons? Bring out the status, and what are the things which are needed to revive this? So you could get a question on this line, which I hope the article is a better answer. Fine. So that's it with respect to this article, guys. We'll move on to the next article. So coming to the next article, down but not out. See guys, this article is all about IRNSS and PSLV rocket. So one should know that what is the meaning of IRNSS and what is the meaning of PSLV rocket. Fine. So I have just given you the background. See guys, IRNSS is an independent regional navigation satellite system. So it's a navigation satellite system developed by ISRO. So where it will provide an accurate information to the users of India up to 1500 kilometers from its boundary. See, why you need to know this factual information is because UPSC tend to ask these sort of information. Even if you look at the last year, there was a question on astrostat where the kilogram of the astrosat and the height of its orbit was asked. So you need to know this factual information, which is very easy to remember if you know the concept. Fine. So see, here the census, it is a regional navigation system. So IRNSS being regional, its dimension could be only up to 1500 kilometers. Fine. So it cannot be like 10,000 or 12,000 kilometers. Fine. So it can provide the navigation service up to 1500 kilometers, and it will provide two types of service. One is restricted service and the other one is standard positioning service. See guys, here the standard positioning service will be released to the public and the restricted service is for the military purposes. Fine. So these are the applications of this IRNSS, which is terrestrial, aerial and marine navigation, disaster management. So I have given you in the point format. It's very easy to understand. So the IRNSS consists of 7 satellites and it is also called as NAVIC. Fine. And out of these 7 satellites, 3 satellites are located in the geostationary orbit and the 4 are located in geosynchronous orbit. See guys, here you need to know one thing, the difference between geostationary and geosynchronous orbit. See, the geosynchronous and the geostationary orbit heights approximately 35,500 kilometers. So both geosynchronous and geostationary orbits are above 35,500 kilometers the Earth's surface. Fine. But the difference between geostationary and geosynchronous is that this geostationary revolve around the equator while the geosynchronous has many orbit. So the name stationary is given because if it is placed in the equator, then it will move along the Earth. It will revolve around the Earth at the same speed along with the Earth. So you from the ground could see the satellite in the morning in one position, and in the evening you can see the same satellite in the same position. Fine. So this is geostationary, where the satellite appears to be in the stationary position. See guys, it is a wide concept which requires a separate video to be taken. So you just know the difference between geostationary and geosynchronous. Stationary means equator. Fine. Now the another important thing which you need to know is this IRNSS was launched with the help of PSLV. So PSLV means Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. See guys, many students have a misconception that this Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle is some sort of launch vehicle which revolves the Earth from poles to pole. So it is a misconception. As one could see, even for IRNSS, this PSLV is used. That is, we saw that IRNSS consists of 7 satellites and these 7 satellites are PSLV vehicles. Fine. So if you talk about PSLV, then it is called as workhouse of ISRO and it can carry weight up to 2000 kilograms if it is for the low Earth orbit, and it can carry 1500 kgs if it is for the geostationary orbit. And it consists of 4 vehicle stage, that is the first and the third is of solid stage and the second and the fourth is of liquid stage. Fine. So this is a short glimpse about PSLV, because see, even for PSLV and this orbits, the science dimension mention is wide. It is very difficult to take this in 5 minutes or so. So this is the background. Now coming to the article. So we know that for IRNSS, the PSLV has been launched and we launched 7 satellite for this IRNS. But now the article say after 39 consequent successful missions, the ISRO made a view that the launching satellites is a child play for them because of the PSLV rockets, which is the workhouse of the ISRO. But the PSLV, which has been placing satellites in various orbits for the past 24 years, has faced a setback right now. That is, the PSLV C-39, which carried 8th satellite for the IRNSS, ended in an unsuccessful mission because the heat shield of the PSLV rocket was failed to be separated during the launch. So the article mentions out of the 41 launches, it is only the second instance where the PSLV has resulted in failures, where the first setback was in 1993 while the second is now. So the article tries to talks about the PSLV, saying that it has played an important role in the ISRO program, where it has set a record of launching 104 satellites in one go, which is a track record, and the failure of this mission is an element of surprise because one should know that during the rocket launch, it is the first and the second stage which is a challenging state, and this PSLV C-39 has crossed the first and the second stage successfully, and this 2 stages went off smoothly. And after these stages, there is a shield which is called as heat shield, which will separate from the satellite, and this is a minor operation, and the failure was on the separation of this heat shield from the rocket. So the article says this failed mission is a reminder that one needs to take an utmost care and scrutiny before launching satellites. But however, the article tries to mention this failure will not have a great impact on the future launches because it is a minor issue which can be easily rectified. And even ISRO has the experience of launching nearly about 39 successful PSLV rockets. So this article now tries to talks about IRNSS. So it says the failure of this mission is particularly disheartening as the IRNSS 1H was jointly assembled by the Bangalore based private companies and ISRO. So this was the first time a private company was involved in making this heat shield, and the satellite was no way to blame for the failure because during the launch it seemed to be perfect. So guys, here I would like to mention a point. We saw here that this PSLV 339 is a rocket of IRNSS 1H. See, we saw in the background that the IRNSS consists of 7 satellites, that is from A to G, that is IRNSS 1A to IRNSS 1G. Fine. But however, this IRNSS 1H is the replacement of IRNSS 1A. And guys, you need to know that PSLV rockets has the lifespan of 3 to 5 years. So the replacement of the satellites is a necessary step, and this IRNSS 1H was the replacement of IRNSS 1A, and this IRNSS 1A was in a sense of failure because the atomic clock in the rocket was not working, that is it was inoperational for the surveillance, and because of this only 6 satellites were operational, and because of this there was a gap in the navigation data sent by IRNSS. So with the failure of this IRNSS 1H, India has to wait before the next mission is sent for the replacement of IRNSS 1A. So as a conclusion, the article mentions the IRNSS was created so as the country would not have to rely on the American GPS system, because see what happened is during the Afghan attack by the USA, the GPS system was changed by the USA in order to trap few terrorists, and this was a caution for the nations like India who was relying on the GPS system, because if there is a case of war or during emergencies, the GPS system could be changed by USA. So one has to rely over their own navigation system, and that's why India opted for IRNSS, that is NAVIC. So it could make Indian military operations self-reliant. Fine. So that's it with respect to this article. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching.